We live in an age of arrogance when it comes to the past. We think we've conquered the Mesozoic Era. We've mapped the genomes of extinct giants, built CGI models so realistic you can see the moisture on a raptor's scales, and turned the most terrifying era in Earth's history into a weekend theme park in our minds. When you hear the word dinosaur, your brain immediately opens a mental gallery of icons. You see the Tyrannosaurus rex, the pinnacle of predatory engineering. You see the Triceratops with its majestic shield, and the Brachiosaurus, whose neck disappears into the canopy. But there is a trap in this familiarity. What we see in Hollywood or on the covers of glossy encyclopedias is just the curated version of prehistory. It's the version that makes sense to us. But the real story of life on Earth is much darker, stranger, and frankly, more ridiculous. Evolution is not a straight line toward perfection. It is a 4-billion-year-old fever dream. For every perfect machine like the T-Rex, there were a dozen glitches in the matrix, creatures that seem to defy the laws of biology and common sense. Imagine you are a time traveler. You step out of your machine 70 million years ago, expecting the majestic landscapes of a nature documentary. Instead, you find yourself staring at a 5-ton, shaggy creature that looks like a giant chicken with claws the size of a human being. You turn your head, and there's a dinosaur with a face so flat it looks like it crashed into a tectonic plate at full speed. You would think you were on an alien planet, but this was home. Today, on Extinct, we are opening the Evolutionary Reject bin. We are exploring 5 dinosaurs that prove nature has a weird, dark sense of humor. We aren't just looking at funny animals. We are diving into the biological puzzles that forced scientists to tear up their textbooks and start over. Why would a creature develop 500 teeth if it only ate soft ferns? How can you fly on bat wings while having the body of a bird? Stay with me until the very end, because our number 1 pick is a creature so confusing that it took scientists nearly a century of digging just to figure out which end was the head. It is the ultimate Frankenstein of the prehistoric world. Strap in. We are going back to an era where the rules of design hadn't been written yet.
Our first stop is 1948. The setting? The Nemegt Basin in the Gobi Desert, Mongolia. Today, this is a world-famous fossil graveyard, but back then, it was a brutal, unexplored frontier. A joint Soviet-Mongolian expedition was working under a punishing sun, chiseling through layers of late Cretaceous sediment. What they found stopped the entire dig in its tracks. It wasn't a skull or a massive leg bone. Protruding from the sandstone were 3 giant, curved, bony sheaths. Each one was nearly a meter long, over 3 feet of fossilized mystery. Imagine the confusion of those paleontologists. In 1948, our understanding of dinosaurs was rigid. You had the big meat eaters and the big plant eaters. Nothing in the record had fingers this long. The lead scientist, Evgeny Malayev, was a brilliant man, but he was staring at a puzzle piece that didn't fit any known animal. Desperate for an answer, he published a paper claiming these were the ribs of a massive 15-foot-long diving turtle. He imagined this turtle used its rib claws to harvest aquatic vegetation from the seafloor. For 25 years, this was the official fact. Children went to museums to see drawings of a giant, imaginary turtle with claws on its chest. It wasn't until the 1970s, when more bones were found, including the arms and the hips, that the turtle theory collapsed. This wasn't a turtle, it was a theropod. But it was a theropod that had completely abandoned the predatory lifestyle. Let's break down the anatomy of Therizinosaurus, because the more you look, the weirder it gets. First, the scale. We are talking about an animal 10 meters long, weighing over 5 tons. If it stood up, it could peek into a 3rd-story window. But unlike its cousin, the T-Rex, its body wasn't built for the chase. It had a massive, wide pelvis and a bloated torso. Why? Because it was a herbivore. Digesting plant matter is a chemical nightmare. You need a massive gut filled with specialized bacteria to break down cellulose. So while the T-Rex was a lean, mean hunting machine, Therizinosaurus was essentially a 5-ton fermentation tank on 2 legs. The mystery of the scythes. But then we have to address the elephant in the room, those claws. If you have 3-foot-long blades on your hands, you should be the most feared assassin in history. But if Therizinosaurus tried to slash a hard target with full force, its claws would likely snap. They weren't built for the high-impact stress of killing. So what were they for? Scientists have used computer modeling to test three main theories. The high-reach gardener. It used them like giant hooks to pull down high tree branches that other herbivores couldn't reach. It was a giant feathered pair of pruning shears. The termite specialist. Imagine a grizzly bear, now make it the size of a bus. It could use those claws to rip open concrete-hard termite mounds for a quick hit of protein. The ultimate deterrent. Even if you don't use a sword, carrying one usually keeps people from messing with you. If a Tarbosaurus, the 40-foot-long cousin of the T-Rex, saw those blades swinging, it probably decided to eat something else. And finally, the feathers. Modern science suggests this giant was covered in a shaggy, primitive coat of feathers. It would have looked like a cross between a giant ground sloth and a prehistoric emu. A 5-ton, pot-bellied, feathered giant with Freddy Krueger hands, peacefully wandering through the forest looking for a nice bush to chew on. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't care about looking cool. It only cares about what works. And for millions of years, having 3-foot fingernails worked perfectly.
If you think your smile is expensive to maintain, you haven't met Nigersaurus. This dinosaur is the ultimate proof that sometimes evolution finds a niche and just refuses to let go, no matter how ridiculous the result looks. Found in the El Raz Formation in what is now Niger, this animal was first described by the legendary paleontologist Paul Sereno. But describing it was a challenge because Nigersaurus looks less like a biological organism and more like a collection of spare parts from a hardware store. It belongs to the sauropods, the long-necked giants, but it's the weirdest cousin in the family tree. The 500-tooth smile. Let's start with the most famous feature, the mouth. Most dinosaurs have teeth arranged along the sides of their jaws, not Nigersaurus. Its mouth is perfectly straight and wide, with all its teeth lined up across the very front. Imagine a vacuum cleaner attachment, but made of bone and flesh. Inside that straight mouth were over 500 teeth. They weren't just lined up, they were stacked in dental batteries. Behind every active tooth, there was a column of 9 replacement teeth waiting in the jawbone. Why? Because Nigersaurus was a specialist. It lived in a world of tough, abrasive ferns and horsetails. It would vacuum the ground, and the grit would wear its teeth down so fast that it had to replace its entire set of 500 teeth every 14 days. That is a rate of tooth replacement that is virtually unmatched in the dinosaur kingdom. The head that couldn't look up. But the teeth are only half the story. The truly bizarre part of Nigersaurus was its brain, or rather, the way its head sat on its neck. By studying the semicircular canals of its inner ear, the organs responsible for balance, scientists realized something shocking. Nigersaurus's natural posture was to have its muzzle pointed directly at the ground. While a Diplodocus could raise its neck to reach the canopy, Nigersaurus was biologically incapable of looking at the horizon for long. Its neck was light, filled with air sacs, and its skull was so thin it was almost translucent. It lived its entire life looking down. It was a 30-foot-long biological lawnmower. It didn't fight. It didn't look for rivals. It just walked through the swamps of the Cretaceous, head down, vacuuming up every green leaf in its path. It represents a one-way street in evolution, an animal so specialized for one type of feeding that it became a caricature of itself. The high-reach gardener. It used them like giant hooks to pull down high tree branches that other herbivores couldn't reach. It was a giant feathered pair of pruning shears. The termite specialist. Imagine a grizzly bear. Now make it the size of a bus. It could use those claws to rip open concrete-hard termite mounds for a quick hit of protein. The ultimate deterrent. Even if you don't use a sword, carrying one usually keeps people from messing with you. If a Tarbosaurus, the 40-foot-long cousin of the T-Rex, saw those blades swinging, it probably decided to eat something else. And finally, the feathers. Modern science suggests this giant was covered in a shaggy, primitive coat of feathers. It would have looked like a cross between a giant ground sloth and a prehistoric emu. A 5-ton, pot-bellied, feathered giant with Freddy Krueger hands peacefully wandering through the forest looking for a nice bush to chew on. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't care about looking cool. It only cares about what works. And for millions of years, having 3-foot fingernails worked perfectly.
For over 150 years, the story of flight was simple. Dinosaurs grew feathers, their arms became wings, and they became birds. It was a beautiful, linear story. And then, in 2015, a farmer in Hebei Province, China, found a fossil that shattered that narrative into 1,000,000 pieces. Meet Yi Qi, pronounced Yi Qi. Its name means strange wing, and it is perhaps the most illegal creature in the fossil record. When paleontologists first looked at the fossil, they saw a small dinosaur, clearly covered in primitive hair-like feathers. But sticking out from its wrists were two long, bony rods. At first, they thought they were misplaced ribs, but then they noticed something impossible, traces of a membrane. Yi Qi didn't have wings made of feathers, it had wings made of skin. The failed experiment. Yi Qi is what we call an evolutionary experiment. 160 million years ago, nature was trying to figure out how to get dinosaurs into the air. One group, the ancestors of birds, went the feather route, but Yi Qi's group, the Scansoriopterids, tried to mimic bats 100 million years before bats even existed. It had feathers on its body for warmth, but it stretched skin between its fingers and that weird wrist bone to glide through the trees. It was a feathered bat dinosaur. However, there's a reason you've never seen a Yi Qi in a zoo today. It was a terrible flyer. Because it had feathers and skin membranes, its wings were heavy, clunky, and aerodynamically inefficient. It couldn't flap effectively, it could only glide, falling more like a flying squirrel than a hawk. Yi Qi is the beta version of flight. It shows us that evolution doesn't always get it right on the first try. It was a biological dead end, a strange little dragon that haunted the forests of China for a brief moment in time before disappearing forever, outcompeted by the more efficient feathered ancestors of the birds we see today.
If you've ever played one of those video games where you can customize your character by picking the head of one animal, the torso of another, and the legs of a third, you've basically created a Chilesaurus. When this dinosaur was discovered in 2015 in the Aysén region of Chile, it didn't just surprise paleontologists, it offended them. It broke every rule in the book. Usually, when a scientist finds a tooth or a foot, they can instantly tell what kind of dinosaur they're looking at. But with Chilesaurus, every bone told a different story. The biological mismatch. Imagine you're a scientist looking at the skeleton for the first time. You look at the head and you see teeth that are spatulate and blunt, clearly designed for grinding plants, like a primitive long-necked sauropod. You think, okay, it's an herbivore. Then you look at the arms. They are thick and powerful, ending in two blunt fingers, disturbingly similar to a Tyrannosaurus rex. You think, wait, is it a predator? Then you look at the feet. They are wide and flat, with 4 toes, designed for walking steadily, not for sprinting after prey. This is a trait of very primitive dinosaurs. And finally, you look at the hips. The pelvis is oriented backward, a classic trait of ornithischian or bird-hipped dinosaurs like Stegosaurus. The identity crisis. For months, the scientific community was in an uproar. Some claimed it was a basal tetanoran, a relative of the great meat-eaters. Others argued it was a completely new branch of the dinosaur family tree. It was eventually dubbed the Frankenstein dinosaur because it looks like it was stitched together from 3 different evolutionary lineages. Why is it so weird? Chilesaurus is a masterclass in convergent evolution. It shows us that nature can arrive at the same solution, like plant-eating teeth or 2-fingered hands, from completely different directions. It lived 145 million years ago, a time of massive transition. It was a rebel. It refused to fit into a box. It reminds us that our neat little categories for meat-eater versus plant-eater are just human inventions. Nature doesn't care about our labels. Our final candidate is a dinosaur that looks like it belongs on the cover of a heavy metal album. Meet Amargasaurus. We usually think of sauropods, the long-necked giants, as majestic, smooth, and rather boring gentle giants. They are the cows of the Cretaceous. But Amargasaurus, found in the La Amarga formation of Argentina, decided that boring wasn't its style. The spine mystery. Running down its neck were 2 parallel rows of high, bony spines. These weren't just small bumps, they were nearly 2 feet long. For decades, this has been one of the most debated features in all of paleontology. Why would a 30-foot-long herbivore need a double row of spikes on its neck? The sail theory.
Some scientists believe these spines were covered in a thin membrane of skin, forming a double sail. This could have been used for heat regulation, like a radiator, or to make the animal look twice as large to a predator. The clattering theory. A more recent and much cooler theory suggests the spines were covered in keratin, the same stuff in your fingernails or a rhino's horn. As the Amargasaurus moved its neck, these spikes might have clattered together, creating a loud, rhythmic warning sound to scare off predators or communicate with its herd. The weapon theory. While the neck is a vulnerable spot, these spikes were sharp. Any abelisaur trying to bite the neck of an Amargasaurus would get a mouthful of bony daggers.